to Greg McHatton is that, his is a program of attraction, not promotion. So
Right.
if I want what he has, I have to go and sit under a tree with him in Valencia, California, and hit
Right.
chip shots until it's working. And I never get beyond a pitch shot in, the 3 days I'm down there, 15, 16 hours, until I can compress that ball with that chip shot, pitch shot, chip pitch, or whatever it is. And if it's not, if I'm not happy, then I'm going to walk away and he's going to keep moving on. It's just not, it's nobody really wants to work for anything these days, and nobody
You're right.
wants to learn the baby steps. Everybody wants to jump on a driver and hit it 300 yards, and that's a shame. That's just the way I think some of us are wired. I have a question for you with regards
Sure.
to Hogan. I've studied Hogan myself somewhat. Do you see a difference between 48-49 Hogan and post-accident Hogan? I personally think that 48-49 Hogan was a better golfer. What do you think?
Oh, very much so. I mean, everything that I do is based on pre-accident. What a lot of people don't realize is that Mr. Hogan's entire left side was essentially destroyed in that car wreck. He lost eyesight in his left eye, pretty much. His whole left side was crushed. And the one thing you would notice post-wreck versus pre-wreck. Don't get me wrong, the stuff from early 50s, 50 through about 55-ish, 6-ish, is still really good. But as he gets older, immediately after the wreck when he came back, you could see a lot more backswing, lateral weight shift. You saw the club start to move a little more down the line. I mean, where you would see his body would stall a little more and his arms would work a little more down the line. And as he got into the 60s, it became very prominent to the point where you could almost see him leaning on it in transition. I mean, it was like he was diving forward, and then the club would, because when you're moving that much laterally, now his upper body started moving laterally, well, the club's really going to move off down the line, and much more so than it did in his prime. And 48-49 swing, which in his own words in the Venturi interview, he said, I played my best golf from 46 to the car wreck. I'm quite sure I'll never play that well again. And I'm almost positive that's a direct quote. It's really close. So I took him at his word. And the problem is there's not that much footage from 46 to 49 because you don't get all the footage until after the accident when he was everybody's hero and he's winning all these major championships. So it's harder to get footage from that era, one. But the thing that's most noticeable, and I have footage of him from late 30s all the way to 80, and I've got him in every era. And anyone that thinks this golf swing didn't change dramatically from like pre-secret, pre-46, from the it's got like there's different eras. I would call you've got the pre-secret stuff. Then you've got the summer of 46 to the car wreck, and then you've got kind of a car wreck-ish to about 50, 55-ish, 6-ish, when he was still pretty serious. I mean, he was always serious, but when he was really competing seriously. And then as you get into the late 50s, he's not competing as seriously, and then you get into the 60s, and he's not competing nearly as seriously. And then you get into the Coleman footage from 78, and then the AMF commercial from Riviera in 84, and you can see definite huge differences if you've studied it enough. And so, when I hear these so-called Hogan experts, arguing over his golf swing, my first question to them is, what era are we talking about? I mean, there's been a number of good books written, but, about Hogan, I've got several of them. I won't mention any of them by name, but there's a couple that are just junk. I mean, I see so much of this junk coming out, and there's some really good ones too, by the way. It depends on what era we're talking about, because I've showed guys when they come down here the difference in footage from pre-wreck to post-wreck to late 50s to the 60s, and there's a tremendous difference. And he even says it in his own writings, where he talks about as he gets older, it's just he thinks his swing's a bunch of junk, and he's basically got a bunch of compensations to overcome his physical infirmities. And and everybody else I've seen guys write entire books over it and claim they've got his secret figured out and on and on and on. And the stuff that their whole book's based on is a bunch of junk that he did in the 60s to overcome his physical infirmities, in his own words. I mean, you can read it in the magazine articles. I've got every one of them in this room somewhere. And so all of that but it's still a matter of opinion. But I personally prefer the 46s to wreck stuff because man, he's speedy. I mean, he's swinging the golf club very much like he'd swing a baseball bat almost. I mean, it's very level. He's swinging his arms in the club very perpendicular to his axis, and it's very baseballish, and it's tremendous speed, and the club is really releasing around, and that face of that club is just, I mean, the leading edge is just smoking down the plane, and then when he turns that freaking corner around, man, that toe releases, and I mean, that thing has got some red heat on it, and there's just no stalling, there's no sign of later what he did later on. Dive forward in the transition, and the arms working down and then way up in the air, and then basically collapsing down onto his shoulders in the finish. And I mean, the swing just changed dramatically, and he said it did. Somewhere in this house I have, basically I think I've got every interview with him ever in print, and original copies of it. And I used to could tell you chapter, verse, word for word every interview, but now that's 20 years ago. But they're here, and some of the golf course guys that have been down here, I've let them read them, and I've got everything from an uncut Venturi interview to the uncut Venturi interview somewhere. It's a VHS tape around here. I've got uncut Coleman footage. It's most people's Coleman footage is real grainy and it's all cut up, and I've got uncut Coleman, and you can learn a lot from reading and studying the man's words. And Coleman footage is a great example. He does a slow motion swing at the end of the Coleman footage, and you can hear George Coleman's wife and these other ladies in the background oohing and on, and oh Ben, that looks so hard, and that must take a lot out of you and all that. Well, the slow motion swing that he does in the Coleman footage is not even close to his actual golf swing. But I do truly believe that that's what he thought he did. That's what he thought he did, and that in his mind, that's what he was doing. But if you swung the way that he did, I mean, he would be so stuck from the inside that the toe would never catch the heel, and he'd hit it 60 yards right. And that's why at the very end of that, he has to do this little flick with his wrist to square the face, because he's attacking so well, I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, he's inside, he's across the line, he drops it back under. I mean, it's not even close to what he actually did in his golf swing. But it does represent probably the most common saying on practice tees all over the world, which is feel is rarely real. And what he was thinking, what he thought he did, and what he actually did were two very different animals. And that's another reason why in 5 Lessons, he contradicts himself throughout the book. I mean, there's so many contradictions in that book. And then when you compare what he wrote in the book to what he was actually doing in his swing, take the footage and measure it against the swing, what he's describing in that book, and there's a lot of differences. And Ledbetter touched on a few in his book, and I thought Ledbetter's book was all right. I mean, there was some pretty good stuff in there. There's some other stuff that I might not have agreed with wholeheartedly, but it was an honest effort, I thought. And there's been Mr. McLean's stuff. He's had some pretty good observations, and but Hogan's just fascinating to all of us. If you love the golf swing, I mean, who's not going to be fascinated with Hogan, because his peers revered him and were just in awe of his ability to strike a golf ball. And then that carried on for every generation after he was, as long as he could physically swing the club, they were all in awe of him. I remember Bill Rogers and Crenshaw and all of them going over to watch him hit balls at Colonial, because he used to hold court over at Shady Oaks during Colonial Week, and a few privileged guys would go over and watch him hit balls. And I mean, the man was in his 70s, and they were still in awe of him. And you can't help but I have tremendous respect for him and what he overcame, and as a person. I met him lucky enough to meet him on 4 different occasions, and he was nothing but a perfect gentleman to me. And my very few minutes of being in his presence, and so I just have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And then when I see guys, and I said, growing up around world-class guys, they all revered him, and so that as a little kid, that was extremely influential. And then the legend, even if you didn't grow up in that environment, if you loved golf, you couldn't help but be drawn into the legend. And when you compound with that I'm around guys I'm watching them win tournaments on Sunday, and they're all in awe of him. Well, and then growing up here in Texas, you couldn't help but just be fascinated by him. And then I was just determined I was going to try to figure it out, not for anybody's benefit other than myself. And Rob's wanted to write a Hogan book, and I just said, I'm just not going to do it, and at least until I've established my own name. I don't fault McLean or Mr. McLean or Ledbetter for writing Hogan books because they established their name before they did it. And so we might do something at some point in time. But I think pretty much everything I'd have to say has already been said somewhere if you just assimilated it into a book. I know I put a lot of stuff on Golf Works. Not much of it's in that little document. There's somebody they wanted to draw me in when they started that Hogan separate sub forum on there. They wanted to get me into those debates, and and my answer was I pretty much said all I got to say about Mr. Hogan's golf swing on there previously, and I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because some of these Hogan debates they're just so circuitous, they're just circular. Nobody's ever going to be able to prove anything because it went into the ground on July 25th of 1997, but I revered him, and I learned more from studying Hogan and reading his writings and comparing him to others than any other source of information. My eyeballs and studying Hogan's swing and comparing it to his words and what I saw that he was doing versus what he thought he was doing. And that Coleman footage is a great example. I mean, he's just simply not doing what he did in that slow motion swing. And it's indisputable if you sit down in front of the computer and look at the footage. I mean, it's not even close. But it's fascinating, Ralph. I mean, we could go for hours on Hogan, so I'll shut up now.
Let's talk a little bit about equipment here, only because I spoke to Jesse Ortiz, formerly of Olimar, and now he's with Bobby Jones Golf. And
brilliant guy.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
great guy, too. Very, very nice human being.
Brilliant.
Him and his dad go back to the days of Persimmon,
Way back.
Venturi, Lee Trevino. One of the things that I talked to him about was, the glutton we have in the equipment market. Not just the equipment market. You have a glutton in all of golf. They overbuilt golf courses. There's a lot of speculation going on, but from the equipment standpoint, what brought this to mind is the fact that I remember back in the 90s, Ernie Vaderson came out with these wedges called Snake Eyes wedges.
Yeah, they're very well.
Double forged. It was a great, very soft wedge. It came out at a $199 price point, and they were well worth it. Later on, Mr. Vaderson came out with a set of blades, MB. Snake Eyes MB1, and he went public, and they came out at a $900 price point. And in my opinion, they were worth every penny, but you couldn't sustain that kind of price point for that kind of quality. Now we have some of these larger equipment manufacturers, and every other week we have a new, it seems like every year or every show. For example, we have the January show, and then you have the October show in Vegas, and every time you turn around, there's an upgrade on this new equipment. It's creating it's just not. I'm wondering how much is that affecting the golfer in terms of their ability to disseminate what's more important. Whether it's more people are concerned with people should people be more concerned about developing a golf swing, or should they be more concerned about the equipment they're using, or I think a lot of people just get caught up in the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I don't want to interrupt you. Well, let me say this. I think it does help to have equipment that fits, that's for sure. But, I see the same thing we talked about earlier, we talked about in the audio interview. I see guys trying to buy a game. And, it's almost like, honestly, they make some fantastic equipment out there nowadays, don't get me wrong. But the manufacturers are almost like Colombian cocaine dealers, and the American golfer is a willing, they're just running it up their nose like it's going out of style. I mean, they're all looking for to buy the game or buy the, the latest, greatest, and so I can't blame them for trying to find something that'll give them a few extra yards or whatever. But my general feeling about it is I know how the deal works. I mean, they track a set of irons, and when they've already got the next set in development and it's ready to go, and as soon as sales, they determine sales are about to peak, then they introduce the next set of irons. And so if a set of irons doesn't sell for very long, if it's not, the sales aren't going well, they're getting ready to introduce the next set. And if sales hang in there for a long time with a certain version, they're going to hang in there and hold back the next version. And but the equipment out there nowadays it's astonishing, really, because I still hit it pretty good, and I know I don't swing it anywhere remotely close to as good as I did at one time, and particularly the drivers. I mean, gee, many Christmas. So it's very important to get equipment that fits. But you have to understand, it depends on what your goals are as to what fits. If you're the type of the normal amateur golfer that's basically not going to stick with much of anything, and you're not really going to work on your game, then you better go get equipment fit that's designed to compensate for the deficiencies in your swing, in particular your impact dynamics. And so you need to get a set of clubs that and a driver and whatnot that maximizes the things you're doing well and corrects the things you're not doing well. Now, as to which particular manufacturer, it's all dependent on aesthetics, what you like the look of. There's certain irons I look at and I just think they're stunning, and then there's some of them I look at and they just look like a bunch of shovels. I don't see how anybody can play them, but, I'll say this. When my father-in-law was on the senior tour, he gave me a Callaway Great Big Bertha 1-iron, and that was without question the ugliest golf club I had ever seen until I hit it. And as soon as that thing started rocketing up in the air, my Hogan blade 1-iron went into retirement, and it's never come out other than to kill a snake or brush. I mean, it's not coming out. I couldn't even start to get that thing airborne nowadays. But that Callaway was the first time I really became aware of what technology could do. That 1-iron was phenomenal because I loved a 1-iron, and that thing was so easy to hit compared to everything I'd used in the past. Even a Ping Eye or Ping Eye 2 1-iron were nowhere near as easy to hit as that Callaway. I became aware that technology was coming along pretty strong, and nowadays it's just ridiculous. Like I said, I look at some of the footage of some of these kids swinging at it, and I know that if you went out there and put blades and persimmon in their hands, they couldn't break 80. And they're in the top 100 in the world. And I know for a fact if they had to try to, some of them have tried, and they can't play blades, or they can play blades okay, but you put a persimmon driver in their hand, they're hopeless. That the equipment has come so far, it's almost too far. I mean, to the point where it's kind of devalued a little bit the quality of the game, the tee to green game that it takes to really make it at the highest levels. Which I'm like Hogan, I'm not I'm not a big fan of guys that hit 8 greens and for cumulative for a tournament they hit 35 greens and they shoot 15 under. Something's wrong with that. When you only hit 50% of your fairways or less and you're shooting under par, but that's the old school coming out in me there. But equipment has made a huge difference. So in answer to your question, I believe it's very important to get equipment that fits, but you got to decide, are you going to be fitted to compensate for the issues in your golf swing currently, or are you going to be fitted because you're working on your swing, you're working toward goals in your golf swing? Are you going to be fitted to the ideal impact that you're working toward when you're out there every day working on your game? Because I have people show up all the time and they're playing with golf clubs that are 2, 3, 4 degrees upright because they've been fitted into it. They've been a pull slicer all their life or whatever, or a big banana baller, so they'll jack the lie angles up so that the ball starts further left, and when it slices back, it comes back online, and it reduces the amount of that slice. But the problem is if you're going to work on a type of release that I like to see, well, the shaft, if you're set up correctly, the shaft with an iron is going to come back not exactly on the original shaft angle, but it's going to come back considerably lower than it is if you're backing up underneath it trying to sling it out to the right or whatever. So you have to fit the golf club to the impact dynamics that you're working towards in your daily practice. And so it's essentially you got to be fitted. You want to be fitted for compensation, or do you want to be fitted toward the corrected impact that you're working towards? In other words, if I set you up in a set of golf clubs that might fit your current impact and it's a way inside out and flippy, and then you're working toward getting the body and the arms to work more together and around, well, you're going to need a substantially shallow, flatter lie angle. Otherwise, when you get to when you start becoming proficient at swinging the club and releasing the club right, you're going to hit it dead left because the clubs are way too upright. And there's so many things that go into fitting clubs. I mean, you've got elements in there. You've got torque. You've got the shaft droop. You've got the shaft loading and unloading. You've got all these factors that go in, and I could go all night on some of this stuff, but I'll spare you that. But it's very important that they make a determination. Are we fitting? Are you going to really work on your game? And if you're not, okay, well then let's fit something in there that's going to help you to play better golf. It's correcting, and it's kind of band-aiding your deficiencies in your current release versus Mr. Hogan or whoever. But you're going to play better immediately because your bad shots are not going to be as bad. But then if you've got somebody like you and I who are pretty passionate about attempting to really build something worth owning, or I'm not that way anymore, but I was 20-something years ago. I want to be fitted into something that if I do what I'm trying to do, if I release the club in the manner that I'm trying to release it, if I achieve the dynamics through impact that I'm attempting to create in my swing, I want to get a good result. I tell people all the time, you're not going to sit out there and make great swings and hit it 50 yards in the bushes on the left or hit them straight right. You're going to find a way to square the face. So you need to be fitted into clubs that are going to allow you to literally know from the ball flight that you made a good swing. And I'm a big believer that nothing's more important in golf than impact. I mean, and as far as the swing goes, that's the only thing that matters. The rest of it's just all pretty boy stuff. And I'm a big believer too. I ask people, and I believe this very strongly. If you're going to work on your golf game, why are you working on it? And and in my opinion, first of all, if you haven't been told or kind of if the long-term goals haven't been laid out for you, kind of this is our destination, and here's where you are, and here's the steps to reach your destination. I have no idea how long it's going to take you to make this journey, but here's where you are, and here's where we're trying to go. Here's our first step. That needs to be laid out. It's particularly important that, let me see how I can phrase this, that the clubs are set up so that when you're working towards your goal, when you achieve it, every once, because it's not like you're going to turn on a light bulb and all of a sudden you're going to be hitting it perfect. It's going to come a little bit at a time. It'll be a ball here or a ball there. Maybe it's 1 out of 20, and then it's 3 out of 20, and then it's 2 out of 4 out of 10. And gradually, slowly, it gets better and better, and then all of a sudden, you're getting closer to your goal. But you'll never know it if the clubs don't fit. And I personally think if you're working on your golf swing and the end result is it going to be a simpler swing with fewer moving parts and a more consistent and more dynamic impact with more compression, then why are you working on it? And I think if you ask a lot of guys, what are you working towards? I mean, what is your goal here? What is the pot of gold at the end of the range? They wouldn't have a clue. They're just out there working on something, and they really don't know why they're working on it. And they're working on, maybe they're trying to go from this method to that method. I'm going to go, well, what do you want to go that method for? It's got more moving parts than what you're already doing. And so, and I kind of come at it pretty simple. We're trying to make this where it's simpler and it's more repeatable. Here's where, I go to great pains when guys come down here to lay it out, because I can't, I'm not going to be able to anoint them a player in a couple of days, but I want them to go home very clear on a lot of factors, and one being, this is kind of why there's so much conflicting advice out there. This is what a good golf swing is, and here's a couple of different versions of it, and you got to be real careful what advice you get, because if you're trying to do this and release the club this way and you get that piece of advice, you just destroyed all of the work that you've been doing. 2, I want them to understand where they are in relationship to what they're trying to do. And 3, I want to give them a kind of a blow-by-blow of this is what we're going to have to do, and this is where it starts. Now go home and get to work. And start your journey. And if they don't want to do what I want them to do, well, it's not like I'm going to be mad about it. I mean, I just want them to play better. If they're truly passionate about it, I could care less how they swing. I get thrilled hearing guys, say they're playing better. I don't care what they're doing. It doesn't matter to me. But it is important that they have clubs that fit the impact that they're working towards, and that they understand very much what they are working towards. That this is where we are. We're in Texarkana, and we're trying to go to New York, and here's how you do it. You just don't go a straight line. It's going to have to, I can describe to you several routes to get to New York, but there is going to be a route, and it's not going to be a straight line, and it's not going to be all level ground. It's going to be some slopes that you're going to look at and say, there's no way I'll get over the top of that, and then there's going to be some easy sledding downhill, and that's the way it is. And anybody that tries to tell you any different is simply not telling you the truth. And, like I said, because I don't do this for money or fame or any of that, I have a luxury of being able to say what I mean and not have to BS or candy coat or any of that. Because, honestly, if somebody, I don't care how much money you got, I'm not going to brown nose you to try to get into your wallet, because I'm not after your wallet. And so I'm going to tell you what I think, and because I see so little of that nowadays, particularly in my business. I see so little. I see so many snake oil salesmen and BSers and guys that are using data to try to prove some point, or they talk a great game. I mean, they talk a great one. They've got the lingo memorized, and they've spent. I guess they just shut down their toilet and read physics books. But if you pin them down and really ask them, what kind of player are you? What kind of player were you? Let me. How good are your students? Let me see their records. They don't have any, Ralph, and they're just trying to figure out an angle to get into people's wallet. And if they can live with themselves doing that, fine. That's just not what I do. And far be it from me to really criticize them either, because that's kind of the way of our world nowadays. It's all about marketing, and it's all about money, and it's all about all of those things that it's just never been what I'm about. And maybe that's bad. I mean, I know my banker and my accountant and my wife would all probably love me to be a little different, but I've just never been that way, and it's never been a motivator. And the thought of going out and earning a reputation without actually earning the reputation bothers me. I don't know. I mean, it bothers me, and I see a lot of guys out there chasing they're chasing the dream, buddy. They want the Golf Digest covers, and they want all of that crap, and I just don't care. It just never meant anything to me for whatever reason. I don't know why. But anyway, I don't know how I got off on that when we started off on club fitting. But
that's okay. That's part of the process that most people aren't willing to, take the, sometimes you have to take 3 steps backwards to take 1 forward, and that linear learning curve. Nobody really wants to struggle. Nobody wants to go through the struggles of having to learn a new move or incorporate something different. I'm personally, I've beaten my head into the ground, but I try to stick with it. And sometimes you're doing there's a lot of guys that want to learn things like over the internet. I mean, it's good to, sometimes you just need a trained eye also. We go back to the feel and real thing. I may feel like I'm doing all kinds of things. Like, even Hogan, who was better than Hogan? Even he felt one thing and really did something totally different. And he described it. He described as what he was doing. He described as doing this, but in reality, he was doing something else. And
well, I think that when you talk about the frustration, believe me, the first place I played, I was given an honorary membership at Oak Ridge Country Club in Garland, Texas, when I first turned pro. And there's a creek that runs through the middle of the golf course called Duck Creek. And it's right by the driving range. And trust me, about every other day, I wanted to go up on that bridge, throw my freaking clubs in Duck Creek, and walk away from it. Or I wanted to take a 2-iron, bust it in half, and slice my wrists. I mean, it was very, very frustrating. And so I can relate very much to what people are going through. But you know what? I went through it 3 different times. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. But you're going to have, you're going to have to be willing to work at it. If you're not going to. It's not going to happen. I mean, that's just the way it is. I tell folks all the time, I mean, there's only 3, who wouldn't want to be a multimillionaire? Well, just about everybody. I can't think about, I mean, even money doesn't motivate me that much, but if somebody said, hey, we're going to give you $10 million, I'd say, that's fine, I'll take it, But only 3 ways I know to do it. You can inherit it. Well, I'm out of luck there. And you can win the lottery. Well, I'm out of luck there because I never bought a lottery ticket in my life. I think it's foolishness. Or you can earn it. I guess there's a 4th way, you can marry it, but I'm out of luck there too. So, and it's golf's the same way. There is no lottery for golf. There's no inheriting golf. I tell my son all the time, I said, Grayson, just because I was a decent player and your grandfather was a great player, it doesn't mean you're going to be any good, because there is no DNA strand for golf, and you're going to earn it. And if you're willing to do the work, you'll be good at it. If you're not willing to do it, you're not going to be. He's going to be a decent player because he's been around it all his life. But if you really want to excel, it's not going to happen by osmosis. It's going to be done with a tremendous amount of dedication and work, and you're going to have to be willing to do things your friends are not willing to do. I tell kids all the time, I mean, if you act like all the rest of the high school kids, you're just going to be just like all the rest of the high school kids. So, if you want to be extraordinary, you're not going to be able to act ordinary. You're going to have to be willing to do things that others aren't willing to do. And in my profession, if you really want to be good at it and really achieve some degree of true success, you're going to have to be willing to get off your butt and do a lot of studying, a lot of just sitting out there on that lesson tee, teaching so-called lessons. It's going to have to be a tremendous amount of reading and studying footage and learning from lessons, because, nobody starts off and hangs their teaching shingle out and is brilliant the first day. I mean, it's cumulatively over time. You learn as much from your students as you do from whatever actual off-site reading and studying you're doing. I mean, you learn a tremendous amount from your students. and it takes time, and that's one of the things that upsets me, but bothers me a bit is you see all these guys that are not that's called dues paying, and they're not willing to do it. They're just not willing to do it, and I'm not trying to sound sanctimonious or that I'm the king, because I'm a long ways from that, but I see so much of that. It's important for us to be very honest with folks and tell them, look, if you really want to be good at this, this is what you're up against. And there is no time limit. There is no expiration date on your ability to play golf, really. I mean, you have an opportunity to improve your entire life. But you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice some things, because I tell folks all the time, too, in life there's no such thing as forward and I mean, no such thing as neutral. You're either in forward or reverse. So, if you're working hard on your golf game, well, your ability to hunt and fish is going to be going downhill, and as well as your marriage and a bunch of other things. And so there's going to be gives and takes, sacrifices, and like I said, there is no neutral. You're either getting better at something or worse at something. Now, you may have to get better at something that it's more important to you. You're going to have to sacrifice other things that you might be reasonably good at, and you're not going to get any better, or you're going to actually get worse. And many kids face that decision. They play several sports, and now they've got to decide on one if you really want to be great. And, it's a very difficult decision. I mean, I have kids all the time. I mean, they're pretty good football players and baseball players and all that. And I'm like, if you really want to be a great golfer, there's going to come a time, and it's not too far off, where you're going to have to make a decision to pursue golf 100%. You're going to have to sacrifice those other sports, to a degree at least. And that's tough on kids. It's tough on them to make those decisions. It's tough on a grown man. If he really wants to be good, are you going to sacrifice some of that duck hunting and deer hunting and fishing that you do, or some of those trips to Vegas to play cards? You may have to sacrifice those and fly here for lessons or whatever, or go see whoever. I mean, Greg McHatton or whoever it is. And that's how you determine whether they're really willing to do it or not, whether they're willing to sacrifice. And I just think that's very important, Ralph, to tell folks that there's no shortcuts. I say, it's a line that I've had for years. You're not going to circumvent the process. You will not go around it. If you want to be a good golfer, you will earn it. And there's other things you can buy your way in, but being a good golfer, you're not going to buy your way in.